Hi family, my name is Danita Rountree Green, and I'm a native Richmonder and the co-CEO of Coming to the Table RVA, which is a nonprofit dedicated to racial healing in our city, and we deal with the legacy of enslavement and eradicating that. So when asked about some of my trials and tribulations, I've had quite a few. I was born a child of the 60s and came up in a very turbulent time when I feel that the children were the soldiers at that time of the Civil Rights Movement, being the first to knock down racial barriers in our schools particularly. I was the first African American, or one of those, in my elementary school class, and my middle school class, my high school class, and all the way up through college. And lots of trials, lots of tribulations, more than I could possibly count. But the one that sticks in my mind the most, it was my first time really realizing that I was a different race, and that someone or some group of people thought I was less than because I was that race, because I was black, because I was African American. 10th grade, I wanted to impress my teacher. I was always the teacher's pet in our classroom, and I wrote my teacher a beautiful poem that I stayed up all night to write just for her, because I thought that she would really appreciate it, and it was my way of welcoming her into our new school in our community. She was a white teacher in a classroom full of black children, and we seemed to have gotten along fine, but I gave her this poem that I stayed up and worked on by flashlight in my room at night. I gave it to her the next day, and she read it and frowned, and she looked at me and she said, "Who wrote this?" And I said, "I wrote this." No, who really wrote this? And she thought I lied about writing it. She took it and balled it up and threw it in the trash. Well, that really upset me, and I had a long walk home, about 6.5 blocks, and I thought about that so much. What did she see when she looked at me? What did she read in my words that upset her so much? And why did she think I couldn't write them? Which leads me to the triumph that I experienced, because in that 6.5 block walk home, I decided that I wanted to be a writer and a creator of stories, and to be able to change the narrative that people obviously had about me because of the color of my skin. I've given my whole life to this concept and this work, and I'm proud to say that I've been published several times, and my words have not only taken me across the United States, but into other countries. So my greatest trial and tribulation as a young person turned out for me to be the triumph of a lifetime.
In 1963/1964, I had the choice of going to 3 different high schools, and that was Maggie Walker, Armstrong, and George Wythe. I decided to go to Maggie Walker, and in that time, when it came to busing, we had to take the city bus. But when we got on the bus, we had to sit in the back of the bus. And also going shopping, Tall Hammers, Mill and Rose, we could not go in the regular part of the store. We had to go to the basement. And those to me were some challenging parts. So I decided to join the NAACP. That was a very good experience there, but I joined that I could do something about what we were going through. But it is hard, and some of that still feels the feeling is still there. The trauma of going through that busing, sitting in the back, going to Sears Roebuck, where it had colored on it. We could not use other bathrooms or drink out of the fountain. Everything had colored on it. So that was the traumatic thing that I went through when I was younger. NAACP was so involved with everything, with Martin Luther King and all those things, that we got to really see changes happening. Civil Rights Bill was signed through our President Lyndon B. Johnson. It was July the 2nd, I will never forget it, 1964. And things didn't just happen like that. It took a little bit of time after the signing before we could really see some real changes happening. But it was the thing was getting better, and travailing through all of that was just a wonderful experience that I would never forget. So that to me was really triumphant, to see the change begin to happen. And it was just wonderful and good. Although everything seemed real bad, but at the end, it was better. Not the best, but better.
You know, my mom got a Section 8 voucher. It was the first time we actually moved kind of to a different community. I guess she wanted to put us in a better light, you could say. And we ended up in the community in Alexandria, Upland Drive. Never forget the address. And I remember our first night there was the first night we ever moved. And it was our first night in the house. And I remember watching the movie. Next thing you know, we heard banging on the roof. And people saying, "Ends, get out. We don't want you here. You don't belong here." And the first thing that went through my mind, I think I was about 5th grade, was like, "Oh my God, where did we move to? I mean, how did we ended up here? What is going on?" This stuff, the stuff that Grandma talked about for our stories. Not to be, I'm looking outside, I'm peeking out, I'm like, oh my God, there's people with potato sack heads on, with one-eye things, and it was just scary. And this was during 1980, so it was just very scary. And like I said, they threw trash. They tried to light the tree, but the wind was kind of blowing. That morning, like I said, we picked up the trash from the front yard. We picking it up. We also getting ready for school. Get on the bus, we get to the school, and I walk into a classroom, and I'm the only Black student in there. So you can imagine the kind of the trauma, the stress, and having Mrs. Smith come over, recognizing that something was wrong, and pulling me to the side and saying, "You're safe in my classroom. You're safe, and nothing's going to happen to you in this classroom." And I think that incident alone just kind of changed, like, how my grandpa, I hated, kind of like white people, like, it's like, oh my goodness, I do not like them, I just couldn't stand them. But I just remember my grandma said, never paint everybody with the same brush. Don't paint everybody with the same brush. And you're going to be okay up there, because I want to move back to Falls Church. I did not want to be there anymore. So just that, being my grandma, being the elder, ensured me that everything was going to be okay, that what you're going through is going to be okay, because don't paint everybody with the same brush. She didn't want me to have that anger, because that was not going to help my situation or my family situation. I'd say, like, a positive thing that come through is the opportunities that you get in life through the experience of others. And I think that comes from really with my grandma, when the first time I seen her write her name. And when she wrote her name like an X. She didn't write her name totally. The victory was just to see that how change can come through each generation, that each opportunity that doors open for. Sometimes they don't open the way in the way of the long-term thing that you want, your like freedom right away, you want these different rights right away, but we all gain something each time. And as we gain it, with that experience, we hand that experience off to others. And then others widen that experience. And I think with my grandma not reading or writing, and me sharing my words with her saying that you have an opportunity to have a better education. She used to always say, Rodney, you can be better than me. I was like, who's better than grandma? Nobody's better than grandma. So I just think just in that is the victory that each generation can pass something on and we all gain something from it.
Good day. My name is Sarah McFarland. I'm the founder of the Link Center, an organization that provides mental health support services to families who have a loved one diagnosed with mental illness. Today I'll be sharing with you one of my experiences from childhood with my grandmother. As a young girl, I was raised by my maternal grandmother, and at the beginning of the month we would always go into town in our small rural community, and my grandmother would cash her check. And each time we would enter the bank, we would approach the counter, and there would be a young white lady, young woman, and she would say hello or good day, and my grandmother would respond by saying what she needed from her and giving her a yes ma'am or a no ma'am and politely nodding her head. In return, this young woman would respond to my grandmother by her first name, Louise. That always puzzled me as a child because that was not the culture of our household. I was taught from the time I was able to comprehend that we were to always speak to our elders with yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, and no sir. But here I was in the presence of a person who's clearly younger than my grandmother, who was being, by all accounts in our household, disrespectful by calling her by her first name. I would go on to learn later in life that that's just the way it was. That was the culture of the environment that we lived in, and that's what was expected of us as Black people, that we were to give the utmost respect when we were dealing with white people. We would always to be polite, to be courteous, to bite our tongues, and sometimes to take a loss if it meant that that white person was going to remain comfortable. What I learned from that situation is to always defend myself, to stand up for myself in all situations, to use my voice, not just for myself, but for those who didn't have a voice or who had not yet found the courage to speak for themselves. One of the things that changed my life and geared me towards that was watching the movie Roots by Alex Haley. Alex Haley tells the story of how his ancestors came from Africa by way of the Atlantic slave trade, were slaves for 400 years, but during this time they always had the hope that they would be free and that they maintained their unit of family during that process. One of the things that I've also done is I've tried to educate my children. My son is recording this video for me right now. And we do a lot of reading. We do a lot of videos, a lot of documentaries, learning about the injustices that were invoked on Black people and how we can go back and undo those things that have been done to us by way of social justice, by educating ourselves, by linking up with other people who are like-minded, by using our voices to speak out against injustices and for the cause of doing what's right for Black people. Thank you.
A tribulation that I've experienced in my lifetime as a result of racism would be being a teenager in the 1980s was the war on drugs, and to see how drugs planted in our community impacted the lives of teenagers, one who were in poverty that needed to survive, and they discovered that this was a way to make ends meet for their family. But it was also a trap for the prison, from the school to prison pipeline. And I experienced a lot of my classmates going from school to prison, as well as losing their life, the fatalities. In that time we were in the city of Richmond, average of 96 homicides a year as it relates to the drug that were planted in our community. For certain, we didn't go overseas to get those. So that seeing that has been a great had impact on me, because now at 51, I'm seeing my classmates come back from incarceration and experiencing that now at this time. But it was that experience that shaped my life. As a African American Xer, Gen X, and a pastor and a preacher, this present moment is triumphant. Seeing protests in a generation, seeing a generation now rise up and say, we're not going to take this injustice anymore, and peaceful protesting, and even the riots, however they've been responding, to see black life matter to black people, that they are willing to do whatever it takes in order for justice to be served in our communities. That's triumphant, and this is a triumphant moment for us.
Good afternoon. My name is Edith Crigler, and I've been asked to participate in this elder chat, which I consider a privilege and an honor. I would like to share with you exactly who I am and how I got to this point in life. I am a restorative justice practitioner and social worker who has been practicing in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois for over 30 years. I started my career out being an advocate for domestic violence victims in the city of Chicago when the Domestic Violence Act was passed in 1982. From there, I have always been involved in some way in the criminal justice system. To this day, I am a member of the Illinois Prisoner Review Board, which sets the stipulations for parole for individuals who have committed crimes in our city and state. It has been an honor and a privilege, and I think this job I have is the best job I've ever had in the world, because it allows me the opportunity to share my thoughts and my experience with African American men and women who are sitting before me that have made some very poor decisions and found themselves embedded in the criminal justice system. What I tell them is that we all are the proud descendants of individuals that survived the Middle Passage. They survived slavery. They came through Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and the Civil Rights Movement. I was a young woman emerging into adulthood during the Civil Rights Movement, and we were fighting for social justice and fair treatment here in the United States of America. And I find it to be ironic that here we are in the year 2020, still fighting for the same thing of social justice and to be able to vote and express who we are as a people.
I would get into a fight almost every single day after school. Kids would fight me because I had lighter skin. They would fight me because my hair was a different texture and it was curlier. And it was really, really difficult as a child to hear adults mistreat me, but also their children. In school settings, on the bus, walking to school. You know, I couldn't get away from it. And it was really, really hard. It was difficult because I never knew where I could fit in. And I think in America and where we are now in America, you have this notion that if you have a lighter skin, you don't know some of the harsher struggles. So, you know, people don't realize that, you know, having lighter skin doesn't minimize your struggle, because I actually lived in Section 8 housing with people that have darker skin, but our experiences were very similar. We saw and witnessed drugs being sold and distributed throughout our communities. We saw prostitutes on the corner, people that were selling their bodies to feed their addiction. We saw people that were actually overdosed or had overdosed and dead bodies that we would walk over to get to school. So keep in mind, you get to school and you have that image etched in your mind. You know, we all have our own different struggles, but my struggle as a person that grew up in low-income housing, that was drug infested, that had a lot of adversities, were very similar to people that had darker skin, but because my skin was lighter, it would always be, you don't have it as bad as I do. You don't understand my struggle. And so oftentimes I found myself struggling with my own identity. So when things did happen, I would say, you know, maybe people are right. Maybe my struggle is not as difficult. Maybe I don't have a, maybe I don't have a right to verbalize, these racial inequalities and these racial slurs and these racial mistreatments because my skin is lighter. So there were times where I would experience these things and oftentimes would just not address it, or I would just, act as if I didn't hear it, because I could always hear that in my brain, you have lighter skin, you have curlier hair, your mom is white, your dad is black, you have no idea, but I had a father that was struggling with addiction. And, eventually he did die of an overdose when I was 8 years old. So I did have similar experiences as people that are darker skinned, in the fact that my mom was raising children as a single mother, which often many of my friends, neighbors, peers were experiencing as well. But I always felt like, my situation can't be that bad because my skin is lighter, even when it was really, really bad. I just said, maybe other people are experiencing harsher things than I am, and who am I to complain about, abuse or, these things that are going on in my home. I remember connecting with one of my teachers at school that was Caucasian. And I remember that day very vividly. I was very upset. I had just found out I was pregnant the day before. And, so I said to her, I'm just not having a good day. And she said, do you want to talk about it? Of course, I said, no, I don't want to talk about it. But it took me, so trauma, when you have a lot of trauma, it does impact your ability to trust people, whether black, white, or any other ethnicity. But what she said to me was, it looks like you're having a tough day today. And for me, growing up and learning that we don't tell our family secrets, or we don't tell people where we live or the things that we see going on, for the very first time, she said to me, I do care and I'm here to listen. So I opened up and I said, I'm 15, I'm pregnant, my life is over. And so she didn't see me for any color or any stereotype. What she saw was me as a human being that was struggling with the situation at a very young age and helping me find solutions. And so she was Caucasian, but to me, there's only one race, and that's the human race. And so that's when I really realized, it didn't matter what color my skin was, it didn't matter where I lived or what was going on, that this human being in front of me was here to help. And it's because she believed in me that I was able to graduate, I was able to make it to college, and I was able to be a mother to my children, and kind of acquire some of those skills that I didn't quite have, but was able to develop because I could put my guard down. So at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all have adversities. We all have traumas. We experience these racial inequalities, but there are a lot of good people that love with their hearts, that love with their minds, that love with their souls. And it's because of the connectivity that they have with other humans that allows them to see you for who you are, but also to help you find solutions to things that may be troubling or difficult in your life.
I say that I am proud that they're getting up and wanting to see the change of injustice because they want peace. The thing is, when you do it, you don't have to get into violence. Sometimes if you just would write it and say, we're going to take it to the right people that can do things in your cities, in the government itself, and stand on it. Don't let loose of what you're doing, because you can see a promise. Things can happen that are better, but there is no need to fight, have violence, mistreat one another. Love is the center of everything. So if you just hold on, keep on marching, keep on travailing, then you will see the peace that you're fighting for.
I would say to a young person or youth that that we always have to keep striving. We always got to keep building, and to remember to keep paving the road that's been paved for us, and understand that we are the construction worker in that. And I think that along the way we lost that and that we need to keep building towards something, improving on our communities, taking responsibility and accountability to make understanding that we're passing something on that's generational. And that's how our change will come. That's how we grow as people. And long as we can always still remember that we are living in this Black privilege. I like to call it Black privilege because there are people who died along the way, people who sacrificed along the way, because we would not have a leg to stand on. So always keep that in mind when you're speaking. Always acknowledge that past. That's where our strength and resilience come from. That's what's built in us. So we can make that connection through our generation. That's how we're going to make change. And that's how we are going to develop the future.
My advice to them is do your research. History of your people is important. And now that we are 50 years from the civil rights movement or era, you do your research, see how Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael, the Black Power movement, how they fought. And then after you do your research, reset the moment and reposition us for now so that we can go and get our reparations, because the work is still to be done. And you all have the power to do that. So I pray the Lord's blessings upon this generation, that God will give them the wisdom, God will give them the fortitude and the tenacity to take us into our Canaan land, if I could use that metaphor, because they can do it. And they join the ranks with the ancestors and us that remain, that we can do the work of justice and carry us from justice to jubilee.
It is very important that the elders, all of us, take this time to share our experiences with young people, to do what I call a brain dump, and teach them everything that we have learned over our lifetime. I have been on this earth for over 7 decades, and I consider it an honor to be able to share my experiences with young people so they can understand the importance of standing in integrity, speaking power, and making sure that we tell the truth at all times. We can change this world if we stick together and we all strive for the same thing. That's to stand in integrity and speak truth to power in everything that we do. I wish all of you all who are part of this journey of trying to be able to establish freedom for us all and equity for everyone on this planet.
My words would definitely model after Maya Angelou, so rise, but it would also be one of the phrases from our late Congressman John Lewis, make good trouble. So this fight is not going to be easy. This fight to justice, this race to justice, breaking down systemic racism and racial inequalities in schools and communities and systems, it will not be easy. And so my words to them would be, rise up. When you feel like you're tired and you don't have anything else to give, rise up. Our next generations do depend on our durability and our ability to weather this storm. It's not going to be one single bout, but together, through years and generations and our stories and our really the fight within us to have good trouble. We can do things peacefully and we can have some actionable commitments. It won't be easy, but we've got to continue to rise to the occasion, to make good trouble in order to break down some of these systems. And that includes our allies as well. I have many white allies that have helped me pave the way and to get to some of these very difficult barriers that needed to be broken down. And so, that is what I would say to our young generation, Black, white, brown skin, Black skin, keep up the fight, make good trouble, commit to having some actionable items on your list, get involved, vote, and vote. Because, our legislators work for us, but we also have to pressure them to do the right thing sometimes. And sometimes doing the right thing is hard. So that's what I would say to our young generation. Keep up the fight.